morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's session. Stratagems, finance leaders as strategic partners. I'll be your host for today. I am Siddhant. I head the business for the UK and Europe region at Spendflo. Spendflo is a SaaS management platform, primarily helping finance leaders to procure software as a service solutions efficiently. I've been in the industry for about 10 years now. Very recently started working with finance leaders in specific. So my perception of finance leaders have always been of someone who've always been, the ones looking at numbers and doing a lot of number crunching. But given the fact that my conversations with finance leaders have only increased, what I have noticed is that they're increasingly being recognized as integral strategic partners, guiding organizations towards sustainable growth and success, which is what we want to be dwelling upon in detail today. And to discuss this, we've got a seasoned finance leader in Marta. Marta, thank you so much for joining in. I will let you to introduce yourself to the audience. So yeah, over to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to have this conversation with you today.
Wonderful.
So maybe a bit about me. I started my career at Apple and Salesforce and then decided to move to a startup. So I worked for a startup in Switzerland and recently joined Pleo. I'm Senior Director of Business Transformation here at Pleo. And I have really moved from a pure finance experience to consolidation, business transformation, and engineering. So my passion really is to build organizations where people can really contribute to the growth and the scalability of the business. And how I do that on my day-to-day is I hire the right talent, the right people. We implement scalable processes and systems. And then when they are independent, they leave my organization and then I would start again with the next one. So that's a little bit what I do on my day-to-day.
Wow, wonderful. Just to expand a little bit about what you just said, right? Like you said that, you started off as a finance person and then moved to various roles, which means, the contribution is just like I mentioned, not just number crunching, it only kept growing. And you spoke about, defining operations, like people will come and go. So how do you set up process where there is, a sustainable way of ensuring the way things are run? Which is what brings me to my first question. So what is your definition of operational excellence?
Yeah, so my definition is about reducing or minimizing the repetitive task. I like to call them monkey jobs, where we used to do monkey jobs, right? Like reducing that and allowing your team to focus on tasks that are impactful and meaningful. This is, to me, process excellence. Obviously, it has to have a component of compliance, which I'm sure we're going to touch upon, but reducing this manual task is, to me, process excellence.
Perfect. I think that's a great start. I think the key word for me was to get rid of repetitive tasks. One thing you mentioned was you worked with Apple. And when we say Apple, that's the first thing which comes to our mind is, they are the ones who brought about big transformation in the software business. How did your time at Apple build your perspective towards operational excellence? So if you can just talk a little bit about your experience at Apple and, how did it affect your mindset as such?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think professionally, I really was born in Apple.
Wow.
And then I grow up in
Great
Salesforce,
start.
right? So to me, finance operations, it has like three pillars. So the number one pillar is about process documentation. So everything has to be documented, otherwise it doesn't exist. And then number two is about compliance and risk management. We have to do things right. And last but not least, it's about automation and the scalability. We shouldn't be doing things that you do once. It should be, you should have impact, and everything has to be scalable. So still today, even though I work in a startup, this is, to me, how I perceive finance operations.
Wonderful. So I think the three pillars that you spoke about, I'm making my notes as well, because next time I'm talking to a finance leader, I'm going to be using these. So you spoke about, documenting everything. The second thing you spoke about was the importance of compliance. And the
Mhm.
third thing you spoke about was having automations in place, right? So these three pillars that you spoke about and you learned at your experience at Apple, how were you able to implement that in a startup like Pleo?
That's a good point. You can't start with any systems. So people that hire me, they think I'm going to come up and I'm going to implement fancy systems. That's not what we do in business transformation. You really need to start with people. So number one layer, your foundation is people. You need to hire the right skill set. Number two is mapping all those processes that you want to scale. And then only then, about 10% of my role at Pleo is about implementing fancy tools that will automate those processes. But I think we really need to focus on the foundations. You can't go too fast in the journey of transformation. That's how we're doing it at Pleo.
Got it. Got it. Wonderful. There's one more point which I would like to touch upon is I not only from you but I hear it a lot from a lot of other finance leaders as well, is the importance of compliance. Because every time we have a conversation, there's always compliance, which is always on top of the priority list, right? So how does compliance fit into the operational excellence framework?
Yeah. It's really interesting because compliance 10, you were saying you were in the market for about 10 years, same about me. So 10 years ago, remember compliance used to be approval workflows,
Right.
balance sheet reconciliation, that equaled compliance. To me today, this is nothing like that, right? We got very, very advanced technology, and it is our responsibility to use it to achieve higher compliance than what we did 10 years ago. So compliance, yes, but how we set up compliance in 2024 is the key for me, is we need to use that technology. We need to automate all those controls and not ask people to manually perform them.
Got it. Got it. I think wonderful, right? So of course, like I said earlier as well. So Martha, you've been a seasoned leader, worked across various organizations. So in terms of a practical example, if you could tell us something in terms of what was a process improvement that you were able to get, which impacted Pleo's growth, I think a practical example will be really helpful, not just for me, but also for our audience.
Okay, so we implemented 8 fancy tools in our finance organization. We could have done with 4, but we did 8. What the biggest impact has really come from NetSuite as our ERP. This is because I would say 80% of the finance process have been automated with NetSuite. So having all our invoice scanning, invoice booking, payment of those invoices, prepayment, amortization journal, all of these used to be manual, is now automated. So that's definitely the biggest impact we have had. But I would say for our stakeholders, the biggest benefit of this implementation has been having consolidated financial data in real time. And that is thanks to the ERP as well. So definitely would say NetSuite.
Got it. Got it. So it's interesting, right? Like the biggest process excellence you believed you brought about was implementing a technology, which is where I want to dwell upon a little. Is in terms of what is the importance of technology in today's times,
Mhm.
and who
I
does
think
it impact? Yeah, in terms of from a finance leader's perspective. So what do you think is like the importance, or why do we need technology today?
it's interesting because I think two roles of the technology we have touched upon, right? So it's automation and compliance, definitely, obviously, but we didn't speak about employee experience and
Right.
employee satisfaction. And that's to me a very, very big role of technology today. Any people, think about any people in your finance organization. If you give them the right technology, they are going to be able to focus on what really matters. They're going to feel satisfied. They're going to feel impactful. And this is to me the power of efficiency at the end, right? So technology and employee experience go hand by hand to me.
Right. So there are a few terminologies that I'm continuously hearing here. Is of course one is the importance of technology. We spoke about operational excellence. But it's great that you got in what is the most important factor, right? Is employee satisfaction. At the end of the day, I think, at least from what I believe, is that's the crux of the business. Whether you're a finance leader or a business leader, it's the employee satisfaction which ultimately gives us the results that we want to. So I think you made a great point there. What I also wanted to talk about a little was, I think, compliance.
Mhm.
So compliance is again what ensures that you really move from being a startup to a scale up to ultimately an enterprise. So how do you ensure process improvements that are implemented meet the compliance requirements?
Yeah, the key is don't do it alone. There's no one in the company who can create the process on their own. So
Got
when
it.
you are about to document the process or create it, make sure you involve all the right stakeholders. So you have to involve risk and compliance, the tax manager, your financial controller, who is going to have the finance technical perspective of every process, even auditor consultants. If you feel like you are not cracking this, just get help from outside. Lately, we have implemented the procurement process at Plio, and we have 30 stakeholders mapping the
Oh,
process. 30. So it's really a team effort. That's the only way to be fully compliant, is to involve the right people.
got it. So again, this is the second time that we're talking about people, and you said that there are going to be different stakeholders that need to be involved. Uh, Pre 2020, everyone was coming to office. Someone was sitting right at the across the table. It was very easy to get people together and to implement change. But of course, things changed, not just at work, but generally overall the sentiment changed after 2020. And just something that invariably comes up is to talk about remote work.
Mhm.
So, I want to understand, right? Like when you talk about involving the right stakeholders. So how has the shift towards remote work impacted the operational strategies in finance?
Yeah. So personally, I love to work from home. We have a big family, so
I
it's
can, we can,
benefit.
I think we can see that from the background.
I really love it. However, I have to admit that working from home can really reduce the sense of satisfaction. I have felt it on myself and my team. Even one day that I achieved so much, doing it alone from home, it can feel quite lonely and unrewarding. So 2 years ago, we implemented the PPP. So this is processes, sorry, not processes, progress, plans, and problems. So PPP. Every
Okay.
Monday morning, everyone in the team writes in our Slack channel what the progress, what they achieved last week. So 5 to 6 bullet points, what they have achieved. Then they write 5 to 6 bullet points, what they plan to do this week. And finally, if there is any problem. Now, this has been a true transformation for the whole organization. They have really obviously increased the sense of I'm prioritizing right. I'm focusing on the right things because I write it down every Monday. They also have a sense of achievement, and sharing this with the rest of the team increases the sense of satisfaction having done what you have done last week. But one thing I didn't expect from that exercise is the synergies between the team. So the organization is quite broad and they work normally in silos. Doing this every Monday morning, I can see the comments between them saying, "Oh, great in this. Oh, I want to know more about that." So this has really bring people together a bit what we used to do in the coffee time in the office, but we do it on a Slack on Monday. So I never miss one, even if we're all very busy. Every Monday, that's our ritual, and we really love it.
Wonderful. I think this is the key takeaway, right? Like we talk about processes and tools and everything, and ultimately it comes down to doing the small things.
Yeah.
Where even I am of the same belief, where satisfaction comes from collaboration. The
Yeah.
more people you talk to, you discuss about work, it only gets the best out of you. So I think that is a great thought, Martha, and something that is a key takeaway for all of us. Talking about collaboration and people, I'm always tempted to talk about the big veteran companies that you work with, right? So there's Apple and there's Salesforce, and of course there's going to be a stark difference to what it is at Pleo. So coming back to again, trying to compare with these enterprises and between a startup. So in terms of compliance, to achieve compliance, what is the unique challenges that a startup faces versus what an Apple and a Salesforce would face?
Yeah. Oh, that's super interesting topic. I believe that compliance cannot be a one-person role, right? So when I join a startup, usually no one has ever worked in a compliance environment before. And then we hire one person or one team that they are called the compliance team. And that doesn't work. That really doesn't work this way. As a startup, it's really important that you start to introduce people that have experience and have a compliance mindset across the whole organization, right? So you have to, your aim shouldn't be a one team effort. It should be a mindset across your whole organization. It's the only way that you can achieve true compliance is with having people that have this mindset. And this is really a cascade, right? Once you have one in one team, the others will learn, the other will join.
Right.
So this is the biggest challenge to me, is to make this change, this um, global change rather than one team.
Got it. Got it. So how I see it is it's about building a culture
Yeah,
where people are talking about compliance as, the key priority.
exactly.
Yeah, which also brings me to the next question, right? So in terms of, okay, this is what we're looking to achieve in terms
Mhm,
of compliance and in terms of operational excellence.
mhm.
So what are some of the key metrics that you use to measure that, hey, okay, this is what is being assigned to a certain person with regards to, say, a compliance or an operational excellence? And what is some of the key pointers that you would look at in terms when you evaluate what they're doing?
Yeah, so for us, evaluating the impact of our implementations is not something we spend much time, to be honest, because it's quite obvious, everyone can see it. But what we do is the cost benefit analysis, which I really like to break it down. The cost part is quite simple to do. So you would add the time spent um, from your team on this implementation. You would include the SaaS licenses with the new tool you implemented, the professional services cost, etc. Easy. Now, for the benefit side, this gets a bit complex, and I like to include one line definitely how much time your team has saved since
Right.
you implemented this new process. But also, we need to think about what could be the potential fees that your company would have to pay if you didn't have this compliance, right?
Got
Or what are going to be the audit fees that you're going to have to pay because you don't have process and you don't have, and everything is a mess and the audit takes really long. So all those are benefits that needs to be considered. So what we do this cost benefit analysis before we implement anything, and then we do it at the end. And usually it should be a 5 years framework. So you can see year 1 and 2, the costs are higher than the benefits, but as you move along the years and you scale, you should really see the benefits in many different areas.
Got it. Got it. I think that's again a great point that you made, right? Which kind of brings me back again to the question on culture.
Mhm.
So, of course, you've seen something at a bigger organization. You know certain things work, certain things need improvement. You've now defined the metrics. You've brought in some key changes. Now, how do you empower people in
Mhm.
terms of how do you foster a culture where people are continuously improving?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting because if I hear some other teams' OKRs, when I look at the objectives and the key results of the year, everyone focuses on these very operational objectives, right? And that's not how I set up my teams or objectives. So to give you an example, a part of my organization is billing and revenue operations. The objectives they're used to is something like complete X amount of tickets by X amount of hours, right? Like SLA 3 hours, da da da. This is something to me that is not gonna
Right.
motivate them to transform, right? So definitely my objectives are something more like this year, your objective is to automate 30% of all the tickets you received through automation and technology, right? So again, let's go back to people. Because I have hired the right people, I know they are not going to drop and not resolve the tickets. They're obviously going to do that, but their focus is going to be towards automation. They're going to invest their time into automate to scale rather than just repetitive answering tickets very quickly, right? So they might take a bit longer the first year. Rather than a 3 hours SLA, they might do 5, but they will focus on their objective, which is automation. So it's setting those goals at the objective level is very important.
Wonderful, wonderful. I think you very nicely summed it up, right? Where one, you hire the right set of people. Second is you give them a very clear goal where it's very number driven and it's not vague. You're not telling them, hey, this has to be done. Rather, you tell them, hey, this is the task. This is the percentage by which you should be looking to get it down to. So I think it's a great way in which you communicate, and it gives a lot of clarity to folks in terms of what are the OKRs that they need to be looking at. Which brings me again to my last couple of questions, right? So we've got an audience here. So what if you had to give them any key advice, like you said, right? Like today you're a business transformation leader, you're not just a finance leader. So if someone has to move towards towards a career growth or a path where they look at things not from just a financial efficiency, but from a business transformation standpoint, what would your advice be to them?
Yeah, I think is you need to imagine you're climbing a mountain, right? And really the base is your team, is the people you're hired. So invest lots of time, about 70% of your effort should be in getting your team ready and set up. Then the next level of the mountain is processes. Make sure you document all your key processes with these people. And then only the last one, and please don't rush to the tippy top before you have your base, is implementing the right technology to automate those. One tip from me is the least amount of finance tools you have, the better, right? It reduces maintenance, it reduces risk in data integration. And any finance leader, what they want to have is consolidated real financial data, if possible, in one place. So reduce the amount of systems would be my advice.
Perfect, perfect. In fact, I think, and I'm getting cue that this is supposed to be the last question, but I'm tempted to ask one more, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. But before I do that, I just want to let the audience know that uh, the floor is open for questions. So please put in your questions in the chat box, and I'd be more than happy to ask Martha those questions on your behalf. So yeah, you can go ahead and do that. Until then, I'll just go ahead and ask, one last question before we wrap up things, at least from my side, is in terms of Martha, you've been in business for so long. You've seen so much evolution happen. There's been some ups, there've been a few downs. So how do you see the landscape of finance operations and compliance evolving?
This is going to be about the dream, right? I hope it
Yeah,
comes true, but it's more about there is going to be no way to do uncompliant finance, right? Everything is going to be so automated. The processes are going to be so well defined that there is only going to be room for a compliance finance process. So this is my dream, and I think we're going towards the right direction.
perfect, perfect. I think that's the perfect way to sum it up, right? Like bringing back the three key points that I noted and how you dwelled upon them in detail, right? One is process documentation, the second is compliance, and the third is automation. So, how these three work hand in hand, and this is what ultimately gives you the operational excellence to then ensure that your business is moving towards a successful path. On that note, I would like to open the floor for questions. In fact, I've got one question. Okay, I'm not surprised. It's got the new buzzword, which is AI, something that we've not spoken about so far in our discussion, but it's great that the audience has brought it up. So, Martha, the question is, how can AI and automation be leveraged to optimize traditional finance processes?
Yeah, so I don't know if the person who asked that question have seen invoice scanning. That's the biggest one, the most accessible. You can get any tool to scan your invoices and book them into your ERP. And make the payment automatically in the bank. And then what happens is the bank sends you the bank statement back to your ERP, and AI is able to match the invoice that automatically was scanned with the payment. So you see, it's something that usually would take a person hours to do. It's done in a matter of minutes with AI. And that to me is the oldest AI technology we have in finance. We have had that for quite a few years, and it's really advanced right now. So I would definitely start investing in invoice scanning, booking. Make sure you don't stop in the scanning part. You go all the way until the end, which is payment and reconciliation of that payment. It's important to finish the loop. Otherwise, the team is not going to be very happy.
I think this is a note even I'm going to make is to learn about AI tools in the invoice scanning space, in the reconciliation space, and so on. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think something that all of us can take note of.
Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, we've got one more. I hope it's fine, Martha. We've got one more question. We've been asking you a lot of questions.
No problem.
Given that we just have a small slot, we want to make sure that, whatever knowledge you have, we're able to extract the maximum from it. So yeah, just one more question here is, can you describe a strategic change you implemented that enhanced both efficiency and compliance? And I know NetSuite is one. Are there any examples that, you believe you can share with the audience as well?
Yeah, so I think one thing is mapping your processes, but the other is having this risk matrix, right? So every time you map a process, make sure you have a risk matrix attached to it. So you have what could go wrong, what do we do to mitigate, right? So, and this is something that has really boosted also efficiency, because when you do that, people realize how manual the mitigation plans are, and they come to me and say, I don't want to do this manually, can we automate it? Oh yes, of course. So the risk matrix really is, in my experience, is a great way to both get compliance but automate at the same time. So I encourage you to try that.
Got it. Got it. I think that's great. Uh, so there's someone who's asking me like, hey, okay, we've been asking a lot of questions. Ask Martha if she has any questions for you.
Oh, yes, maybe you can. I am very interested to know what, in your view, is the most effective way to collaborate across different parts of the organization, so different departments. What's the best way
Oh,
effective
you
to
put me on a
collaborate?
spot. I'd come prepared with a lot of questions, but not sure with answers. But in terms of, I think one thing you mentioned was about the importance of culture, right?
Yeah.
So, how do we ensure that there is a fixed culture or a fixed way of working that is inculcated across the organization? Like hiring the right set of people. I think, and from my experience, at least, I was one of the first people to be hired at this organization. So, what did we do? Across each org, we wanted someone who was not only good at what they were doing, but also wanted to build a culture. And it starts from there, right? Like you start with hiring your top 5 or 6 people for different departments,
Mhm.
and then they start hiring for their teams. So once you've set a strong base, you just grow from that. So I guess it's that. That's the
Absolutely.
best way to ensure that the culture is intact. And the other thing is about how do you do a lot of cross team collaboration.
Mhm.
Appreciation is a key. Today
Yeah.
if I'm talking to a pre-sales engineer or someone from the marketing team, the first thing that we need to do is to ensure that, hey, okay, we thank them, or we acknowledge the work that they're putting in, because that's a point that you mentioned as well, right? So ensuring that at every level we are making people feel recognized and we like the work they're putting in. So I think that's been great. So yeah, I guess that's the best way to go about it.
That's a really good one.
Thank God. I was a little nervous. Okay, I wasn't expecting you to ask me any questions, but yeah, I think that was great. We are more or less, I think it's time for us to wrap up. But great session, Martha. I think for me as well, to be having to have the opportunity to talk to someone like you with such varied experience, right? And what's really important again is, I'll go back to the first point, is in terms of irrespective of which department you belong to, It's about seeing the business as a whole. And to see your journey from a finance leader to someone who's transforming businesses is, I think, something which is inspiring for all of us. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. It's been a pleasure talking to you for the last 30 minutes, and I'm hoping that we'll get more such opportunities. So yeah, thank you so much. And
Thank
thank you so much for the audience for taking off the time and having this conversation with us. Over to you guys, and have a great lunch. We won't hold you back for too long. So yeah, thank you so much and have a nice day.
thank you so much. Have a great day.